Good afternoon. The first item of business this afternoon is portfolio questions, and the first portfolio is rural affairs, land reform and islands. I call for question number 1, Karen Adam.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on how the Scottish Economic Link Licence is working.
Cabinet Secretary Marie Goujon.
A review of the amended Economic Link Licence condition was published in August this year. It showed the policy has delivered significant benefits. Landings of mackerel and herring into Scotland have risen sharply, meeting phased targets and bringing record values to Peterhead and Lerwick ports. This has strengthened coastal economies, supported jobs and driven major investment in processing facilities, improving business security and enabling expansion. Scottish processors report greater confidence to invest, extended employment and improved access to premium export markets in the Far East. And overall, the policy is achieving its aims but continues to be under review.
Adam.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. Given the UK Government's decision to shortchange Scotland's fishing and coastal communities, tools like this economic link licence are more important for keeping value in our ports and our onshore sector. In Banffshire and Buchan Coast, processors tell me that economic link changes have helped, but they still see some unused capacity and are concerned that without increases to it, businesses may suffer. Will the Cabinet Secretary consider commissioning further analysis on whether the current licence conditions are maximising landings and processing in Scotland? And if not, what options might there be to strengthen them in support of coastal jobs?
Cabinet Secretary.
Just to say, I want to thank Karen Adam for raising that important point, and that I recognise just how important the licence condition has been for Scotland's processors as well as for our ports too. Now, we do know that we have some really challenging advice from ICES this year, and they're recommending major quota cuts for mackerel and herring, which raises real concerns about throughput, the impact on our processors and the jobs that depend on that. Now, I would just want to outline that we are in active discussion with processors, with catchers as well, to assess what that full supply chain impact and what, if any, government intervention might be needed. But we do also recognise that there are really strong views on this. There are also differing views on this, on any further intervention too. And any action we take will be guided by the public interest. I would want to emphasise, though, that no decisions have been made on intervening to increase mackerel or herring landings in 2026 at this point, but we are going to carefully consider stakeholders' views.
Briefly, Beatrice Wishart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Fishermen face many challenges, not least the economic link, which can impact the market and impede competitive opportunities for vessels to get the best value for their catches. So does the Cabinet Secretary recognise that without an economically viable pelagic fleet, the impact will be considerable on processors, the supply chain and island and coastal communities?
And briefly, Cabinet Secretary.
I do absolutely recognise that, and I hope the member would take some assurance from the points that I've made there. What we are doing is trying to assess the impact of that advice on our catching sector, on our processing sector, and really having those discussions to see what, if any, intervention there might be. But I just want to provide assurance no decisions have been made. We are engaging closely because we have got to try and do all we can to mitigate the impacts of what we're seeing through that advice.
Question 2, Claire Baker.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what recent work it has undertaken with the agricultural sector to reduce the number of fatalities within the industry.
Minister Jim.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Scottish Government works closely with the agricultural sector to improve safety and well-being. The Farm Advisory Service also offers practical risk management support, and the Next Generation Training Fund helps new entrants access accredited safety-focused courses. We have awarded £25,000 to Farm Strong Scotland for its social wellbeing project. That fosters supportive networks and reduces isolation through community engagement. We've also provided £75,000 to the RSABI to continue to deliver emotional, practical and financial assistance, including counselling, mental health support and help with essential living costs. Together, these measures strengthen the resilience and wellbeing across Scotland's agricultural community.
Claire Baker.
I thank the Minister for the answer. Since April this year, there have been 22 UK farm fatalities, including the tragic loss of life at a farm in South Lanarkshire in October. And the Health and Safety Executive say that farm vehicles continue to be the leading cause of fatalities and injuries. The Farm Safety Foundation survey found that women in agriculture are less likely to carry out a risk assessment before taking on a new job, and that they receive less training than men. So can I ask if there is disaggregation of sex when recording injuries and fatalities, if we have an understanding of where the increased risks for women working in agriculture are, and what is being done to reduce these risks?
Minister.
First of all, I'd like to thank Claire Baker for bringing this subject up, because it's one that is very close to my heart. The specific point that she's asked about disaggregation of sexes, I will need to come back to the member on that. I don't have an answer to that right now. But in terms of the overall safety for farmers, it's not just in the actions that they take, it's also in their mental well-being. There are a number of risks to Scotland's farmers, and I think it's absolutely essential that we make sure we put as much help and support in place to protect them, in order to ensure that these fatality numbers are reduced.
And briefly, Jamie Halker-Johnson.
Thank you. Can I remind the Chamber of my register of interest as a partner in a farming business, member of the NFUS. Minister, were you aware of the high number of lives lost to suicide in the agriculture sector, with the winter months a particularly difficult time for many farmers and crofters? And the pressures on farmers can be exacerbated by the impact of government actions and the frustration, anger and disappointment that these can often bring. So can I ask the Minister how the Scottish Government will ensure that the decisions it makes and how it administers schemes and delivers its policies recognise that behind every application is a farmer and crofter already under pressure?
Minister.
I hear exactly what the member is saying in terms of the loss of life due to suicide. It's a subject that is incredibly close to my heart. I would put on record that every time there is a decision made by anyone in the Scottish Government with regards to how we help and support or work with people to get through difficult situations, that is very much to the forefront of their mind. And I would make sure that our officials are very clear with that, as I know that they have always been up to now in all the circumstances that have been brought forward for my attention.
Question 3, John Mason.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on the progress of Nature Scots species licensing review, including timelines for producing and implementing recommendations for improvements alongside charging for licensing services.
Minister.
The species licensing review is being finalised by NatureScot following the completion of the external review phase. Once that review has been presented to Ministers for consideration, it will be published alongside our response to the recommendations and any timelines for taking the recommendations forward. We expect to be in a position to respond to the report once it is received in early 2026.
John Mason.
I think we're expecting this in January 25 and then in July 25, and now all we hear is that it is being finalised. Can the Minister assure us that NatureScot have been listening to the RSPB, the Scottish Raptor Study Group, and that their input will influence recommendations?
Minister.
As I said, there has been an awful lot of input to the review, and NatureScot will be taking all of that into account before the finalised report that will come to Ministers, and that will then be presented to Parliament.
A couple of brief supplementaries. First, Mercedes Villalba.
Thank you. Our public money is being spent mitigating the environmental damage caused by polluting private companies. We can't afford to go on like this. So it's welcome that NatureScot are exploring the potential to apply the principle of cost recovery in its species licensing review. I've previously asked if the Scottish Government supports the principle that polluters themselves must pay for the environmental damage that they cause, but the Minister didn't answer, so I'm asking again, does the Scottish Government agree with the polluter pays principle?
Minister.
The members asked the question before, and I gave a fairly succinct answer at that time. Any review that comes forward will be taken with the review. We will have a report on that review and we'll bring it back to the Parliament.
Fergus Ewing.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. May I ask the Minister this question, of which I've given him notice? He has received the outcome of the Muirburn licensing test phase from representatives of Scottish Lands and Estates and the Scottish Gamekeepers Association to see whether NatureScot would be able to grant Muirburn licences to prevent and reduce the risk of wildfire on peatland. It's clear from this testing that the legislative provisions currently in place are unduly prohibitive when it comes to issuing licences for Muirburn to take place to prevent and reduce the risk of wildfire. So, can I ask the Minister what consideration he is giving to Amendment 271 to the Natural Environment Bill?
Thank you, Mr Ewing. That is not to do with the species licensing review. If there's anything, Minister, that you can add in response to that, I'm happy to let you do so.
All I can say is that I'm carefully considering all licences that are in front of me at this moment in time.
Thank you. Question 4, Annabel Yu.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what assessment it has made of any economic benefits of the growth of aquaculture in Scotland.
Secretary.
Several assessments, including the Marine Economic Statistics and annual fish and shellfish farm production surveys, demonstrate that the growth of aquaculture in Scotland has led to significant economic benefits for our country. The Marine Economic Statistics report for 2023 is due to be published in December. But in 2022, aquaculture generated £337 million in gross value added, which is 7% of the marine economy GVA, and employed 2,200 people directly. The latest Scottish Fish Farm Production Survey reported that in 2024, salmon farming achieved a record value of over £1.3 billion. Our vision for sustainable aquaculture, published in 2023, sets out our support for the sustainable development of the sector and recognises the considerable social and economic benefits the sector delivers.
Annabel Yu.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for her answer. She indeed is aware of recent estimates which put the annual contribution of the salmon industry to the Scottish economy at over £1 billion. And given that, and the fact that some 11,000 jobs are supported, including over 600 at Maui in Rosyth in my constituency, will the Cabinet Secretary reaffirm the Scottish Government's commitment to do all it can to promote the industry, both here and abroad, and will she welcome the significant contribution that it makes to sustainable jobs across Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
Just to outline that I'm happy to reaffirm that commitment to Annabel Ewing and more broadly across Chamber today, because we do remain committed to promoting the sector both at home and abroad. On the international stage, we are continuing to work with our enterprise and innovation agencies to ensure that Scotland has a key presence at some of the major trade shows, targeting new business opportunities, but also ensuring that Scotland remains that global leader as well as a collaborator more broadly. And we are also working to ensure that more people can enjoy Scottish salmon. This year, £50,000 was awarded through the Marine Fund Scotland, match funded by the sector, to try and grow sales under the coveted La Belle Rouge label. And we continue to work together to try and capitalise on new market opportunities. And I'm delighted that Scottish salmon is on track to deliver another record year for exports in 2025.
A couple of brief supplementaries. First, Edward Mountain.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I remind members of my register of interest that I've an interest in a wild salmon fishery on the East Coast. Now, the salmon farming industry is known for unacceptable high mortality, unacceptable high use of antibiotics, and unacceptably high numbers of escapes. That has resulted in the Royal Warrant being withdrawn from Maui. Surely it's time this government should consider withdrawing their blanket support for this, what can only be described as suspect industry.
Cabinet Secretary.
First of all, in response to Edward Mountain, I have to make it absolutely clear that Scottish aquaculture is a highly regulated sector in Scotland. There are robust controls on planning, on environmental impacts, as well as on fish health. Now, Edward Mountain raised the Royal Warrant issue there, but of course decisions on that are not a matter for the Scottish Government. We protect fish health through regulation, through communication, through the legislation that we have as well. And on top of that, the Animal Health and Welfare Scotland Act 2006 protects farmed animals from unnecessary suffering and places a duty of care on those caring for animals to meet their welfare needs. We know how important the aquaculture sector is in Scotland, the fact that it supplies well-paid jobs in some of the most rural parts of our country, as well as in our island communities too. And again, it is a highly regulated sector that is so important for our wider economy.
Thank you. And briefly, Ariane Burgess.
The salmon farming industry makes many claims about itself that have proven to be misleading. It claims to be transparent with mortality data, but doesn't include cleaner fish, salmon in transport or certain smolts. It tells us it wants to protect wild salmon, but puts in legal appeals against the very framework that's designed to do this, and many other things. Will the Cabinet Secretary commit to commissioning an independent Scotland-wide cost-benefit analysis as per best practice, so that future policy for the salmon farming sector is grounded in transparency?
The point that was raised by Ariane Burgess on transparency, I have to say that in terms of the information that is published in relation to the aquaculture sector, it is very transparent, and there's more data published in relation to aquaculture than many other sectors that we have. Now, I appreciate that there is a point there, and we discussed this when the committee was doing its inquiry into salmon farming. There are issues about how that data is used, the amount of data that we have, and how that is more widely communicated, which is why there were a number of recommendations and a number of commitments that I had made in response to the committee in relation to that, as well as in relation to some of the other matters that Ariane Burgess raises. So I would just want to offer that assurance that there are a number of pieces of work that are underway.
Question 5, Kevin Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on how Brexit has impacted Scotland's food and drink producers.
Cabinet Secretary.
The food and drink sector continues to suffer the consequences of a hard Brexit, which has disrupted supply chains and created new trade barriers. Many Scottish producers continue to face reduced EU market access, which has resulted in a 50% decline in the value of fruit and vegetable exports between 2019 and 2024. Now, while the full economic consequences of exiting the EU are still to be realised, we do know that businesses face higher trading costs and some producers have lost the ability to export goods to the EU altogether.
Kevin Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Today's official statistics show that food and drink exports are worth £7.5 billion. They remain Scotland's largest international export sector, accounting for a fifth of Scotland's international exports. But there has been a 5% real terms decrease since 2018. A decrease that has had an impact on jobs, the economy and communities because of Brexit difficulties, and yet we know that Westminster Labour won't even consider re-entering the EU, the single market or the customs union to help exporters. Are they wrong?
Cabinet Secretary.
I couldn't agree more with the points that Kevin Stewart has made and just how he has highlighted, I think, the massive economic damage that Brexit has done, and particularly the hard Brexit that the UK government pursued at that time. I think it's also important to remember some research that was done by the LSE Centre of Economic Performance, which shows that UK households have paid £7 billion to cover the cost of post-Brexit trade barriers on food imports from the EU, which has been pushing up average household food costs by an average of £250 since December 2019, which of course we know then has been disproportionately impacting low-income households who spend a greater proportion of their income on food. So it has undoubtedly increased the barriers and the costs to industry. I think, as Kevin Stewart also rightly highlights, is the value of our food and drink exports. Now, we can hope that some of that damage can potentially be mitigated by a new SPS agreement, but of course it will never fully reverse the damage that was done by Brexit.
Question 6, Keith Brown.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on what response it has had to its letter to the UK Government regarding the Fishing and Coastal Growth Fund.
Cabinet Secretary.
There has been no response to my letter to UK ministers on the 22nd of October, setting out our serious concerns with the announced approach to allocate the Scottish Government just 7.78% of the £360 million Fishing and Coastal Growth Fund. This is, of course, an insult to the Scottish fishing industry. On the 4th of November, and together with other key Scottish stakeholders, I also wrote to the UK Government calling for the Scottish Seafood Industry Action Group to be reconvened to discuss this urgent issue alongside other concerns. Once again, there has been no reply by the UK Government to date.
Keith Brown.
Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for her answer and just say how appalling it is that we have this unresponsiveness from the UK Government. The Scottish Government is clear in its expectations that Scotland's fishers needed and deserve to maintain an arrangement outside the Barnett Formula that recognised the relative size and importance of fishing industries across the UK, and that Scotland should receive at least 46% of that fund. The Labour Party has ignored Scotland's Government and insulted our fishing industry. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree that Scottish Labour MSPs need to decide who they are backing, our fishing industry and communities, or their bosses in Westminster?
Cabinet Secretary.
I couldn't agree more with that. And as we've said right from the outset, we were clear, as Keith Brown has just highlighted in his question, that Scotland should receive at least 46% of the Fishing and Coastal Growth Fund, a share that would recognise the sheer size and just the importance of this vital industry to Scotland too. Now, the decision to apply the Barnett Formula to this fund was a decision that was taken by UK ministers. It completely ignored what we asked for, and again is an insult to our industry as well as to our communities. Now, I remain absolutely steadfast in urging the UK Government to reconsider its approach and to actually enter into discussions with both us as well as fishing industry leaders to try and agree a way forward which treats our industries and communities ultimately with the respect they deserve.
Question 7, Pam Gosal.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what correspondence it had with the UK Government regarding support for the Scottish farmers ahead of the upcoming UK budget.
Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. We have repeatedly raised intra-UK agricultural funding allocation concerns with the UK Government and most recently with the DEFRA Secretary of State at the Interministerial Group meeting on Monday. The Cabinet Secretary for Finance and Local Government has also written to the Chancellor on the 15th of October, highlighting this issue among our priorities for the UK budget. We have been clear that a population-based Barnett settlement for land and sea support is inappropriate. It misses the opportunity to recognise Scotland's larger share of land and seas and the potential to contribute significantly to the UK's climate and restoration goals.
Pam Goldson.
I thank the Minister for that response. The Labour Government's contempt for farmers was shown this afternoon as they refused to reverse their cruel family farm tax. However, Scottish farmers, including those from my West of Scotland region, have been let down by the SNP Government most recently through the inconsistent Future Farm Investment Scheme. This year, they have also failed to publish the Rural Support Plan, provide multi-annual ring-fence funding and return the missing money in full to the agricultural budget. Can the Minister assure the farmers that this year's Scottish budget will support them?
Minister.
The one thing I will agree with Pam Gosselin is that the IHT introduced by the UK Government is an absolute disaster for family farms here in Scotland. But I have to say it's a bit rich when we've got a Tory sitting telling us about how all the things that we're doing here is wrong. They were the people who started the dismantling of farm support down in the rest of the UK, while it was the Scottish Government who continued with direct payments, who continued with the schemes to make sure we protected our hill and upland farmers, who continued to make sure that we supported an industry to the point where we have proper working relationships, whereas it's absolutely disastrous with the people down in England.
Got a supplementary first from Alistair Allen, briefly.
I'm unclear what the Tories did for Scottish farmers when they were in the UK Government, other than utterly failed to advocate them. Perhaps one of the many reasons they haven't won an election in Scotland since 1955. So can the Cabinet Secretary outline to the Chamber how the Scottish Government is presently engaging with the UK Government for farmers following the budget?
Briefly, Minister.
Well, every time either myself or the Cabinet Secretary meets with the UK Government, we absolutely insist that they have to take on board all the concerns that we have about making sure the funding is there for Scottish farming. But since leaving the EU, Scotland's farmers have lost the certainty of multi-annual rural funding, and that is essential for farming. The UK Government funding remains inadequate, with future increases now based on population share, not the land use or agricultural needs or environmental potential. And that is unfair to Scotland, which is a far greater share of our UK land mass, much of it used for extensive livestock and upland farming, with huge potential to contribute to the UK's climate and nature and food security goals. We have consistently pressed the UK Government for a fairer, long-term funding settlement, and we will continue to do so in the future.
Okay, question 8, Pauline McNeill.
To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to reports of alleged animal welfare abuse at the Bakkafrost Scotland salmon farm.
Cabinet Secretary.
The Scottish Government takes the welfare of farmed fish seriously. Robust legislation, policies and industry standards are in place to safeguard fish health and welfare, and I'm clear in my expectation that all producers must comply. The Animal Health and Welfare Scotland Act 2006 protects farmed animals from unnecessary suffering and places a duty of care on those caring for animals to meet their welfare needs. The Animal and Plant Health Agency is responsible for considering and investigating complaints and potential welfare breaches relating to farmed animals, including farmed fish.
Pauline McNeill.
It has been alleged that salmon infested with sea lice were left in a pen that was meant to be completely empty, and Animal Equality UK carried out covert filming at Bakkafrost Scotland farm on Loch Torridon and claims welfare regulations were breached. Tesco has suspended the farm while it investigates the supplier. The Rural Affairs and Islands Committee, in its first report of 2025, found that the Scottish Government isn't being responsive enough to the complex needs of the Scottish farming industry and how it interacts with biodiversity, animal welfare and the workforce. So Cabinet Secretary tell me today what is being done to ensure the industry receives better support as well as improved oversight.
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I think there are a number of matters in there. I think one thing that I'm quite keen to do, I'm happy to send on to Polly McNeill just the list of recommendations, and I think some of the work, a list of commitments, as well as outlining some of the work that we're taking forward in this area, because we recognise the recommendations that have been made by the Rural Affairs Committee and in its most recent inquiry, which updated some of those recommendations too. But I think I would just want to offer some assurances that there are specific strands of work that are taking place in relation to animal health and welfare on this. We've made a commitment to publish guidance in relation to that as well, which of course we would look to engage on and consult with as part of that process. And I am providing regular updates to the committee just to keep them well aware and updated on that work as it progresses too. But I'm more than happy to follow up on that and send that information to Polly McNeill.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. With apologies to those I wasn't able to call, that concludes portfolio questions on rural affairs and islands. There will be a brief pause before we move to the next portfolio to allow front benches to change. Okay, the next portfolio is health and social care. Just to advise the Chamber, there is an incredible amount of interest in supplementaries. It's fair to say, with the best will in the world, I'm not going to be able to enable everybody that wants to ask a question to do so. I will get in more, though, if the questions are brief and the responses likewise. I call question number 1, Katie Clark.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to the report by the Auditor-General into the financial sustainability of NHS Ayrshire and Arran, which found that the board is facing a deficit of £33.1 million in the current year.
Cabinet Secretary Neil Gray.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government is aware of and has received the Section 22 report issued to Ayrshire and Arran, and will continue to work with NHS Ayrshire and Arran to resolve the issues that have been highlighted. Ayrshire and Arran is already at stage 3 of the NHS Scotland Support and Intervention Framework for Finance, and we continue to work closely with the board's executive team to improve performance across all areas, not just finance. Targeted support has been provided to help strengthen financial sustainability, and the board received baseline funding of £1 billion in the budget, which I note that neither Katie Clark nor the Labour colleagues voted for.
Katie Clark.
The Auditor-General said that the Health Board needed a £51.4 million loan in 2024-25 to break even, and NHS Ayrshire and Arran also has outstanding loans totalling £129.9 million, the highest amount across the NHS in Scotland. The Auditor-General also stated the severity of the financial challenge was unprecedented and warned it was relying on overly optimistic savings plans that may not be achievable. What can the Cabinet Secretary do, given that the position seems unsustainable, and can he outline what further support the Scottish Government is able to give, given the huge concern about the current situation?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, we have provided NHS boards with increased investment in their baseline funding for Ayrshire and Arran. That is over £1 billion. It represents an increased investment of £123 million from 2024-25. We continue to provide support to the new interim Chief Executive, Professor Gordon James, and I'm confident that in the work in partnership with the escalation team in the Scottish Government, it will continue to bring NHS Ayrshire and Arran's finances into better order, as well as improve the performance that patients need to see.
Brief supplementaries. First, Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome the £123 million, 13.9% uplift in Ayrshire and Arran's funding for this year, and also the additional non-recurring funding for escalated health boards to improve financial sustainability, £43.7 million for NHS Ayrshire and Arran this year. Can the Cabinet Secretary advise how Scottish ministers will ensure these additional funds are being used effectively, and can advise how escalated boards will be supported in the coming financial year?
Secretary.
Officer, I thank Kenneth Gibson for putting those details on the record in his question. The Scottish Government has provided NHS Ayrshire and Arran with several strands of support to improve financial sustainability, including leadership support and funding to support the delivery of improvement programmes. The NHS Scotland Financial Delivery Unit routinely challenges NHS Ayrshire and Arran on their financial performance and trajectories, including the utilisation of additional support funding. And the additional funding that is being provided for NHS boards is starting to have a positive impact on waiting times. For example, boards have reported significant reductions in new outpatient waits, including, for example, a 72.2% decrease in ear, nose and throat waits in NHS Ayrshire and Arran, a demonstrable indicator of improved performance to go alongside the financial rigour that we need to see both in Ayrshire and Arran and elsewhere in Scotland.
Briefly, Brian Whittle.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. This morning in the Public Audit Committee, Auditor General Stephen Boyle described the NHS Ayrshire and Arran as being in a loop of unsustainability since being escalated to level 3 on NHS Scotland's support and intervention framework in 2018. That's 7 years of Scottish Government support and the situation, if anything, is getting worse. So does the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that 7 years should have been more than enough time to see significant improvement? And is that lack of improvement a failure of the Scottish Government support on an indication that NRAC formula, which determines Health Board funding, is fundamentally flawed?
Briefly as possible, Cabinet Secretary.
No, the NRAC formula is an objective measure of the need for healthcare services across Scotland. It takes explicit account of the variation in need for healthcare due to age and sex profile, the morbidity, life circumstances, as well as local populations and the cost of delivering services across different geographies. We're providing significant support to the new Interim Chief Executive Professor Gordon James, and I'm confident that the rigour that he will bring to the finances and performance at Ayrshire and Arran will see improvements for patients in the locality.
Question 2, Ros McCall.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what action they're taking to tackle tooth decay in children.
Minister Jenny Minto.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. We continue to invest in our flagship Child Smile programme, which provides universal oral health interventions for all children and additional targeted measures for children from vulnerable backgrounds. The programme has supported significant improvements in child oral health, with the latest National Dental Inspection Programme results showing that 81.5% of P7 children have no obvious tooth decay, compared to 52.9% in 2005. We've also made significant improvements to children's dental care as part of our payment reforms introduced in 2023, with dentists now able to undertake a much wider range of preventative treatments to all children.
Ros McCall.
Well, whatever the Minister says and whatever the Government is doing, it's not enough. I have an FOI request which shows that in the past 5 years, almost 3,000 children in NHS Tayside have been admitted to hospital because of tooth decay, while over 3,000 have had a tooth extracted in hospital. And that's on top of the percentage of primary 7 pupils with tooth decay increasing this year for the first time since 2005. Now, this is unacceptable. So what does the Minister say to families in my region who are dealing with the consequences of the dentistry crisis? And what urgent action are they going to take to fix this?
Minister.
Thank Ros McCall for her follow-up question. With regard to tooth extractions done under general anaesthetic, I'm sure Ms McCall will recognise that that is in secondary care. I recognise that there are waiting time issues in that area, and that is something that my team and the Chief Dental Officer are having very in-depth conversations with health boards to try and relieve the waiting time pressure. As Ms McCall will also recognise, the Scottish Government has invested over £135 million in reducing waiting times. And she may be saying that that's not enough, but it is noticeable investment to reduce waiting times that I would hope that she can recognise.
Brief supplementary, Carol Mochan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Data released only yesterday revealed that Dumfries and Galloway has the third lowest rate of child dentist registrations in Scotland. Significant inequalities exist, with there being more than a 10 percentage point gap between children living in the most and least deprived areas. So I ask the Minister, why are children in Dumfries and Galloway considerably worse off when it comes to registration? What is the Government's response to the inequality, and what action will it take to address this?
Minister.
Thank you. Thanks, Carol Mochan. And I recognise the importance of ensuring that we are supporting people and children specifically in the more deprived areas of Scotland. Defreesa Galloway has been impacted by a reducing a number of dentists that we are working very closely with the board. We have got additional funding, SDAI allowances to improve the increase in the number of dentists in various areas, and I know that the Scottish Government has invested more within public practice, within the Health Board, to ensure that there are available appointments within the Health Board for people on waiting time lists.
Very briefly, Willie Rennie.
Progress that was being made with Child Smile has stalled, and the poverty gap is still pretty stubborn. Now, I'm sure the pandemic's had an impact upon that. But I think there is also no doubt that the lack of dentists, NHS dentists, in large parts of the country, including North East Fife, is also having an impact. So what more is she going to do to improve the service in areas like mine?
Minister.
I thank Willie Rennie for his question and would just like to remind the Chamber and Willie Rennie that I have been working hard with the other 3 nations equivalents in my role, but unfortunately a number of the levers are held within Westminster and unfortunately Stephen Kinnock to date has not provided us with the support. We need to ensure that dental therapists are included back on the visa list. But I would point out that through our latest National Dental Inspection Programme results showing 81.5% of primary 7 children have no obvious tooth decay, and that is a vast improvement since 2005.
Question 3, Davy Ross.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. It's to ask the Scottish Government what specific actions it has taken to address the waiting list for hip and knee replacement surgeries.
Secretary.
Officer, as part of our record £21.7 billion budget investment in health and social care, we have targeted over £135.5 million this year, including £32 million for trauma and orthopaedics, to tackle long waits. Yesterday's update from Public Health Scotland confirmed that waits over 52 weeks have fallen for the 5th consecutive month, a testament to the dedication of our NHS staff. Our investment is delivering results. In 2024, hip and knee operations reached a record high with over 17,000 first replacements completed. And we're seeing progress in bringing down long waits in NHS Lanarkshire, with over 52-week waits for orthopaedic new outpatients reducing by 27% and inpatient and day cases reducing by 31% since the end of July, just after Mr Russell took up his position as MSP for his constituency, which is a fact I'm sure he will welcome.
Davy Russell.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. However, none of that is helping my constituent Aileen. She has been waiting for a knee replacement since January 2024. She's been bandied about to various meetings and assessments because until her full care plan is determined, she doesn't join the waiting list. It took 20 months for her to be added to the waiting list, despite her GP telling her at the onset that she would need this surgery. Even now, she has no surgery date, no sign of treatment on the horizon, and despite passing the 12-week legal guarantee nearly 2 years after first presenting to a doctor, does the Cabinet Secretary not see that creative accounting applied to NHS waiting lists is hurting patients?
Secretary.
No. Obviously, Aileen's case, if I can be furnished with more of the detail from Mr Russell, because I think there's some confusion there in how that's been presented around the treatment pathways that she should be able to get access to, and for which I expect NHS Lanarkshire to be able to respond to in a timious way, especially given the investments that have been put in and the progress that is being made both for outpatient and inpatient and day case processes for which Aileen will need to be subject to. But of course, the measures of waiting times that Public Health Scotland has updated to are the very same measures, that are very similar measures, that are taken in NHS Wales, for which Mr Russell's colleagues in the Labour Party are responsible.
Very brief supplementary, Claire Hawkey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And I remain Chamber. I'm employed as the bank nurse by NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde. As the Cabinet Secretary mentioned in his previous answer, knee and hip replacement surgeries are a record high under this SNP government, proving once again that whilst waiting lists rise under Mr Russell's bosses in NHS England, this government's plan to bring down waiting lists in the NHS is working. Can the Cabinet Secretary advise how this Scottish Government will continue to drive improvements like these in the months ahead?
Briefly, Cabinet Secretary.
Indeed, and I thank Claire Hawkey for that question, not least because I noted with interest the UK Parliament's Public Audit Committee's analysis of the challenges with waiting times in Labour-run England. In Scotland, as part of our plan to reform the NHS, I announced proposals for sub-national planning, and this will ensure that NHS health boards work together in the east and west of Scotland, which will allow teams to work across their boundaries to better support patients to get the care they need in a timely manner. And this year, we've allocated more than £135.5 million to specialty areas where it can have the greatest impact against longest waits. And yesterday, we saw waits over 52 weeks reducing for the 5th month in a row.
Question 4, Douglas Ross.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government when it last met with the Chief Executive of NHS Grampian to discuss healthcare in Murray.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, both ministers and Scottish Government officials regularly meet with representatives of all NHS boards, including NHS Grampian, to discuss matters of importance to local people. Douglas Ross will be interested to know that I will be carrying out NHS Grampian's ministerial annual review on Monday in Aberdeen.
Douglas Ross.
Yesterday, the Independent National Whistleblowing Officer stated that NHS Grampian was not properly handling concerns raised by staff. And I've had cases raised with me by staff at Dr Gray's in the orthopaedic department. I've had a number of conversations with the Chief Executive of NHS Grampian, and frankly, I don't believe I've had full or truthful answers from her. When I said I would then raise it in the Chamber, I was told that she would brief the Cabinet Secretary. So my worry is that he's been fed the same lines that I've been fed, that have been put back to constituents who still don't believe what they're being told by the head of NHS Grampian. Given the grave concerns that they are highlighting, does the Cabinet Secretary agree that this issue should be reviewed by someone from out with NHS Grampian?
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank Douglas Ross for raising this question. I have seen some of the correspondence that's gone back and forth between Mr Ross and Laura Scaife-Knight, where she understandably has to ensure the confidentiality of employees is respected. However, there are clear processes in place for whistleblowers to be able to raise concerns, including through the National Whistleblowing Officer. There are whistleblowing champions in every NHS board. I have met them all. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to comment further than that, other than to point Mr Ross in that direction and his constituents to ensure that where they have a concern, it is not just listened to, but is acted upon appropriately.
Question 5, Faisal Chowdhury.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government regarding the narrowing of the eligibility criteria for the autumn COVID-19 booster, what assessment it has made of the cost to the NHS and the impact on hospitalisation rates.
Minister Jenny Minto.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Eligibility for the COVID-19 vaccine is based on the advice of the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation and is identical across the 4 UK nations this winter. JCVI advice is based on their standard cost-effectiveness analysis, which shows the oldest in the population and individuals who are immunosuppressed are at the highest risk of serious COVID-19 related disease, hospitalisation and death. The recent Public Health Scotland Respiratory Report, covering the 10th to the 16th of November, shows that COVID-19 activity decreased or remained stable overall, with 73 hospital admissions that week, a decrease from the 81 the previous.
Faisal Chowdhury.
Thank the Minister for the answer. One of my constituents, who is type 1 diabetics and whose son is a type 1 diabetics, recently paid almost £300 to get booster jabs for herself, her son and her husband, who is an unpaid carer. I'm sure the Scottish Government will agree with me that it is unacceptable to accept vulnerable families across Scotland to pay hundreds of pounds at a time to protect themselves from COVID. Therefore, would the Scottish Government consider applying a discount for type 1 diabetics under 75s?
Minister.
I thank Faisal Chowdhury for his supplementary question, and I understand that the groups who are no longer eligible for COVID vaccination, namely those aged 65 to 74, those in wider clinical at-risk groups and frontline health and social care workers may be feeling anxious. To them, I would say that the overall threat of COVID has thankfully diminished over time due to high levels of vaccine-based immunity and naturally acquired immunity from the infection.
Question 6, Ruth Maguire.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether patient complaints and feedback about the care they have received from NHS boards are used to inform inspections undertaken by Health Improvement Scotland.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, Healthcare Improvement Scotland has a duty to improve the quality of healthcare in Scotland, and its inspection programme is a key part of fulfilling this. HIS determines what inspection activity it should undertake using a risk-based, proportionate and intelligence-led approach. This includes consideration of patient complaints and feedback, which are a valuable source of information and intelligence to make improvements. HIS also gathers information from patients, families and staff during inspections. Through the Responding to Concerns process, HIS addresses complaints in a person-centred manner, upholding the rights of everyone involved.
Ruth Maguire.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. The Cabinet Secretary and I have previously spoken in Chamber about the impact a negative experience of birth can have on women and their babies. And I shared a letter that my constituent had submitted to NHS Ayrshire and Arran, giving a detailed account of her negative experience. She submitted this on May 2025. Now, NHS Ayrshire and Arran won't engage with MSPs once their complaint process is triggered, an approach that I find to be quite defensive. I have chased up on behalf of my constituent on the 5th of October when I was told a draft response was in progress, again on the 30th of October. The constituent said at the end of her letter that she wished her complaint would be handled with the seriousness it deserved and that corrective actions would be taken to improve patient care. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that this is far too long to wait for answers to help her process the trauma and distress that she's experienced, and that a defensive, bureaucratic response to feedback is wholly unhelpful?
Presiding Officer, I am very grateful to Ruth Maguire for putting that detail on the record. It is clearly unacceptable for a response to take this long, and I am very sorry to hear of her constituent's experience, which I know she has written to me about and for which I will be responding in writing. I will, after this session, also ensure that the exchange between Ruth Maguire and I is shared with the Interim Chief Executive of Ayrshire and Arran to underline the concern that has been raised today and to ensure that the process is sped up for her constituent and for MSPs interacting with Ayrshire and Arran. The NHS complaints handling procedure sets a 20-day target for responses, emphasising timely and effective resolution. Complex cases may require more time, for which I think we all understand, and extensions are allowed. But if the target cannot be met, the complainant must be informed and given an expected response date. And I will make sure that both myself and Ayrshire and Arran are responding to Ms Maguire as soon as possible.
I'm going to need briefer responses and certainly briefer questions. First, Stu Webber.
Presiding Officer, following an unannounced HIS inspection in June 2025, NHS Lothian's maternity service has been escalated to level 3, requiring government oversight after failing to meet 26 basic standards of care. Only 2 Health Board maternity services have been inspected, Cabinet Secretary. So will the Cabinet Secretary accept that now is the time for a nationwide review into our maternity services?
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank the member for her question. I've set out in detail, as has the Minister for Public Health and Women's Health, the response that we are taking very seriously, both to Lothian's position and also the wider concerns that were raised regarding the BBC Disclosure documentary. We are establishing the task force which can help inform our review, and as an immediate update, I had a further discussion with NHS Lothian alongside Ms Minto this morning to get a progress update which gave assurance around progress being made, and I'll be updating Parliament in due course as to the outcome of that discussion.
Very briefly, Jackie Bailey.
I welcome the work being done by Health Improvement Scotland, but the context is that public satisfaction with the NHS in Scotland has dropped to its lowest level in a decade, according to the latest Scottish Household Survey. Complaints to NHS boards have gone up and appear to be taking longer to resolve. So what is the Cabinet Secretary doing to improve performance with complaints?
Cabinet Secretary.
In terms of performance with complaints, I've already set out the expectation that we have, and I've already set out what I expect to happen in the case that Ruth Maguire brought to our attention today. In terms of the performance of the health service, I'm pleased, while we've got more work to do, yesterday's Public Health Scotland figures demonstrate the progress that's been made, the corner that has been turned, thanks to the efforts of staff, and I expect will boost confidence in the health service amongst patients and staff and reduce the need for complaints.
Question 7, Douglas Lumsden.
Progress it is making on reducing audiology waiting times at NHS Grampian.
Minister Jenny Minto.
Thank you. I want to recognise the steps NHS Grampian is taking to reduce audiology waiting times. The board has recruited a qualified audiologist and are appointing a new team member for Murray to support older adults with hearing loss. Increased staffing will help, though high demand means progress will take time. Grampian has shortened some clinical appointments, prioritised adult reassessments and introduced text reminders to reduce missed appointments. Workforce pressures remain significant, with one audiologist serving around 28,000 patients, well above the average across other boards.
Douglas Lumsden.
I can tell from my inbox it's well above the average, because if the Scottish Government committed to delivering a community audiology service, high street audiologists would be able to deliver this in as little as 18 weeks and clear over 70,000 people from audiology waiting lists. So can I ask the Minister, what is preventing her from scoring an easy win and delivering on her party's manifesto commitment to put community audiology services on a par with a successful community eye care model?
Minister.
I thank Douglas Lumsden for his question, and I and the Scottish Government remain committed to its vision for integrated and community-based hearing services across Scotland. We recognise the difficulties that are being faced by health boards, as highlighted by the independent review of audiology. And we wanted to commit and check and ensure that we introduced all the recommendations for that. I have asked also officials to continue to have conversations with the audiology community to improve the service that we are offering people that live in Scotland.
A very brief supplementary, Karen Adam.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can the Minister advise what steps the Scottish Government is taking to look at improvement and reform of audiology services, particularly regarding engagement and collaboration with stakeholders?
Minister.
I thank Karen Adam for her question, and as I indicated, we are continuing to engage with NHS boards as well as the third sector and private providers to scope out potential models for any future community hearing care services, ensuring that the voices of those with lived experience inform this work.
Thank you. I call question number 8, Hamza Youssef.
To ask the Scottish Government what discussions the Health Secretary, or indeed Minister, has had with other ministerial colleagues regarding the use of sport to support its goal to reduce child poverty.
Mr Mairead Todd.
Eradicating child poverty in Scotland is a national mission and this Government's top priority, with ministerial collaboration across portfolios to identify and implement effective measures such as the Scottish Child Payment. We know that sport can change lives, creating meaningful and hugely positive opportunities for children affected by poverty. The benefit it delivers can improve children and young people's health, their educational and social outcomes. Through Government and Sport Scotland funded initiatives such as Active Schools, the Sport Facility Funds, Active Play Development Project and the Extra Time Programme, we improve opportunities to be active, ensuring sport continues to contribute to our efforts to tackle child poverty and promote inclusion across Scotland.
Hamza Youssef.
Can I thank the Minister for that comprehensive response, and I hope she will also join with me in congratulating the efforts of Pollock United in my constituency, who offer an outstanding range of community services, including Extra Time, which was mentioned by the Minister. But on top of that, their parent and toddler groups, their groups for older people, in addition to their multiple football sessions for young people in my constituency. And at the heart of their efforts is their desire to make their community thriving, prosperous and inclusive for all. So can I ask the Minister what concrete action is being taken to support Pollock United and sporting organisations like it to maintain and expand their vital community efforts, particularly in a challenging financial circumstance?
Minister.
The Scottish Government recognise the incredible impact and the reach of sport organisations and community clubs like Pollock United, and I know the Cabinet Secretary was incredibly impressed by the work that they do when he met them last month. We'll continue to work alongside them to support the communities that they serve. We provide the SFA with £1.3 million annually via Sport Scotland to support grassroots football, but additionally we're investing £5.5 million in the Extra Time programme in partnership with the SFA, supporting up to 5,000 children and families through breakfast, after school and holiday clubs, improving children's health and well-being whilst enabling parents to work, thus tackling poverty right at its roots.
Thank you, Minister. With apologies again to those I wasn't able to call, that concludes portfolio questions on health and social care. There will be a brief pause before we move to the next item of business to allow front benches to change.